The day is finally here, ladies and gentlemen. After a long COVID outbreak hiatus, we finally have Dallas Stars hockey back in our lives. On today's show, I'll be joined by Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers to give you a full breakdown and preview of tonight's matchup. All of this coming up on a Thursday edition of Locked On Stars.
Your Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, the only daily podcast covering the Dallas Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, and you are locked on the Dallas Stars on this Thursday, January 6th, where we have Dallas Stars hockey. Very excited to be watching a hockey game tonight with the Dallas Stars playing. Excited to be joined by another Locked On host today in Armando Velez of Locked On Panthers. We'll get to that interview in just a second. But before we get into that, want to take a moment and say thank you for stopping by today's episode of Locked On Stars. Whether this is your first time here or you are a recurring listener, thank you for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe and follow the Locked On Stars podcast wherever you find your podcast at, whether that's on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. And no matter where you listen, the show is always free, just like Dirk Nowitzki lives rent-free in my head. Shout out to the big 4-1 for the Dallas Mavericks on getting his number retired last night at the American Airlines Center. Be sure to check that out if you're going to the game tonight. Well, without any further hesitation, let's get into today's crossover episode between myself and Armando Velez of Locked On Panthers. Well, welcome in everybody, Stars fans and Panthers fans alike. This is Dane Lewis with the Locked On Stars podcast, joined now by Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers. Armando, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Dane. It's great to be getting together with you. These two teams, the Florida Panthers and the Dallas Stars, it's pretty recent because last year they faced off 8 times last year with the whole divisions. The Florida Panthers did go 6-2-0 against the Dallas Stars last year. And one of those games was like Tyler Seguin's return to the lineup. His very first game was against the Panthers last year. The Florida Panthers were supposed to play their first game of the season last year against the Dallas Stars before their COVID outbreak caused a whole bunch of rescheduling. And it as much as I love seeing more of what a team's got, however, I am very glad that we are back to a normal season. But it was crazy going against the Dallas Stars and the Tampa Bay Lightning in the same division after both of them met in the Stanley Cup final the year before.
Yeah, it was absolutely crazy. And I think even for Stars fans, we knew for sure we were in trouble with the Tampa Bay Lightning having to play them so many times. And then little did we know that, just road trips to Florida in general would normally end in misery for the Dallas Stars, just with COVID and injuries and just everything else. Not the most fun season, but the Stars have recovered a little bit. And it's nice to, like you said, be in a crossover here. This is the first Stars game that we've had since December 20th. Last time we saw them was at home against the Minnesota Wild, where they came out on top in a really nice 7-4 win. But, I wish, in a perfect world, the Stars could be coming back to the league, coming back to normalcy against maybe an average team or a below average team. But that's not the case. And, they're playing a Florida team that's, playing very, very well, tied for second, I believe, at this point in time, and points across the entire league with Washington and New York. So just a kind of a question for you about this Florida team. What has worked so well for this team this season to put the Panthers where they're at right now in the NHL standings?
The difference has been Sergei Bobrovsky. That has been the biggest difference of it all. He's had a resurgence. I've said it many times on my show that when Spencer Knight was inserted as the guy in the first round series against Tampa Bay, it kind of lit a fire under Sergei Bobrovsky. Sergei Bobrovsky becomes a dad as well, and that really helped them get a little motivated to go back to the training room and work a lot harder. And that has been the difference. And Sergei Bobrovsky is coming off another performance where the Florida Panthers, in their 6-2 win against the Calgary Flames, he gets 47 of 49 saves in the most recent game. And it's just been a big turnaround for a guy who is in year 3 of his 7-year, $70 million deal for the Vezina, multiple time Vezina Trophy winning goaltender. And that's really been the difference in that. The new acquisition of Sam Reinhart. Sam Reinhart is he got off to a little bit of a slowish start during his time with the Panthers, but he's just been racking up the assists, racking up goals. He went almost a month without scoring a goal at one point, and then now he's just been on a run, getting points in almost every other game, almost averaging a point per game in like a month stretch for Sam Reinhart as well. And rookie Anton Lundell. Right now, the Florida Panthers have 2 players on the COVID list, with Sam Reinhart being one of them, and Mason Marchment being the other. And Sam Bennett, who they got from the trade deadline last year, is suspended right now. This is his second of 3 games of suspended for a high hit on Cedric Paquette on Saturday against the Montreal Canadiens. So Anton Lundell, 20 years old, falls to number 12 in the draft just 2 drafts ago, and he is playing a top 6 role right now for the Florida Panthers after mostly playing in the bottom 6 to start off, because of course he's a rookie, he has to get his reps in, but he has been embracing the challenge for him. And he talked a little bit about Jordan McPherson of the Miami Herald wrote an article about how Anton Lundell says that he's in a place that he doesn't want to be, but he understands the process and he's trying to find a way to raise his floor. And Anton Lundell right now is in a better position in his rookie year than Barkov was in his rookie year. I'm not saying that he's going to be exactly like Alexander Barkov, but the early steps of Anton Lundell is a very, very good sign. And he's a guy who is mostly in taking faceoffs in the defensive zone late in games too. So the fact that they have this much trust in a guy like Anton Lundell has just been a thing of beauty.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like, this team is continuing to do well and, play near the top of the league despite having some adversity to go through with the suspensions, injuries, roster moves, things like that. A guy that I don't think you mentioned Reinhardt, second on the team in points with 26. The guy above him, Jonathan Huberdeau, with 42 points, pretty big margin there. What has been so special about him this season that has put him in that position outside of just scoring goals and racking up the assists? What does he do well in order to put himself in that position to do those things?
He's just an incredible skater overall, and his stick skills are just incredible. There was a statistic on most points throughout the calendar year of 2021, and behind the 2 superstars in Edmonton of McDavid and Draisaitl, number 3 is Jonathan Huberdeau in the calendar year of 2021. Amazing. And there's a point in this season, Alexander Barkov has been up and down as far as and he's been doing it with Alexander Barkov as well. And they don't even play on the same line together. Huberdeau's on the second line along with Sam Reinhart, and now it's Anton Lundell and Anthony Duclair, but he's been mostly with Sam Reinhart and Anthony Duclair there, but now it's Anton Lundell because of Reinhart being on the COVID list. But he's just been finding ways to just mesh with his teammates well. And of course, a lot of credit also has to do with Anthony Duclair as well. The speed factor of him has a lot to do with creating opportunities, and it's helped Huberdeau out a little bit. And he had another beautiful. The Jonathan Huberdeau is, as far as highlight plays, he's really known for that spinorama backhand pass. And he just got a beautiful one once again against the Tampa Bay Lightning, he had one against Tampa Bay last year to Anthony Duclair. This one was to Aaron Ekblad just the other day in their 9-3 victory over a shorthanded Tampa Bay Lightning team. We have to acknowledge that they were shorthanded, but still a display that Jonathan Huberdeau put in that game and in this stretch, getting 3rd star of the week last week, getting another star of the week a few weeks ago as well. So I'm not saying he will win the Hart, but I think there needs to be a little bit of consideration for Jonathan Huberdeau for the Hart Trophy this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Putting up numbers like that, I don't see why he can't at least be, in the conversation. I think for most, NHL fans, members of the media, it's easy to just assume a McDavid or Draisaitl is going to get that award. But yeah, certainly credit due to Huberdeau for putting up the numbers he's putting up, but also, just where Florida's at as far as the standings and where they stand as, Stanley Cup contenders. We talk about how great this team is and certainly a threat to be reckoned with. But what would you say is maybe a weakness of this Florida team that the Dallas Stars or any other opponent might look to exploit throughout the rest of this season?
It's been the power play. It's funny because the Florida Panthers are top 2 in goals for per game, but as far as power play percentage, they're 19th. And it's crazy to think that this team has just been so great even strength, but they still haven't figured it out consistently on the power play. They have scored in 3 straight games on the power play, 4 goals in those 3 games. So there's some progress based on the power play, but it just hasn't been a consistent year-round thing when it comes to the power play. And of course, not everyone has been healthy as well. That has a little bit to do with it. Barkov especially. And though I've said this on the podcast, though I don't want Keith Yandel back. It was the right decision to buy him out. They're still trying to figure out how to have that quarterback on the power play with Keith Yandel being gone. They're still trying to figure that out. And of course, the situation with Coach Q resigning and the guy who ran the power play in Andrew Brunette taking over as the head coach. Now he has multiple hats that he's wearing as far as being on this coaching staff. So that maybe has a little bit to do with why the power play is a little lackluster when it comes to that. But it's a work in progress for sure, and it's been a lot better now than it has been in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, that'll certainly be an interesting thing to watch, especially for the Stars. Coming off of this long COVID outbreak hiatus and the penalty kill kind of picking up some momentum before the break, but has been pretty inconsistent so far this season. So, especially considering that, as well as just the physical state of the team as far as, being game ready, I think that'll be an interesting matchup to watch. And sometimes the Stars have struggled with discipline and really dug themselves in a hole by giving other teams opportunities on the power play. So, certainly something to be on the lookout for. And we're going to take a quick break, but after a couple messages from our sponsors, Armando is going to ask me some Stars related questions. So we'll be right back after a quick break. And jumping back into today's crossover episode between Locked On Stars and Locked On Panthers, Dane Lewis joined by Armando Velez. Armando, the floor is yours. I'm here to answer all of your Stars questions for yourself and Florida Panthers listeners out there.
All right, so a few weeks ago, you bragged a little bit about the top line of the Dallas Stars of Rope Hintz, Joe Pavelski, and Jason Robertson. Of course, the Dallas Stars record isn't where they want them to be, but as far as that stance that you had a few weeks ago on them possibly being the top line in the whole NHL, where do you stand on that right now?
I still feel pretty confident in that claim. And I've had this discussion with a few other hosts on the network as well, and just some other people. And certainly, it's a subjective kind of conversation of who actually has the top line. But you said the Stars' record certainly not where they want it to be. And I know, now they're falling even more behind, especially in a crowded Central Division because of this pause. While these other teams that are playing, Nashville, Colorado, St. Louis, are continuing to stack up wins. I still feel pretty confident. Pretty much any game that the Stars have won this season, or at least had a fighting chance of winning if they've fallen short, has been to the credit of those guys on the top line. Whenever the Stars were on their 7-game win streak back in the back half of November, early December, Rupe Hintz was scoring about one goal a game, and he had a hat trick in there. Joe Pavelski continues to be an ageless wonder at 37, leading the team in goals, points. And then, of course, Jason Robertson was a Calder finalist last season. No sophomore slump from him, just incredible effort from him, whether he's shooting the puck or chasing down rebounds. All three of those guys just have a really good chemistry with one another. And so I think that they're going to, need to lead the way for the Stars team to get back into game shape, especially Joe Pavelski. He's a recent addition of this Stars team, only been here for a couple years, but a guy that, the coaches and other members of the Stars media always say that he's the first guy on the ice at practice, working in front of the net on his redirects, things like that. Certainly, needs to lead the charge. And then, of course, Rupe and Jason Robertson needing to carry a little bit of that slack as well. But yeah, I still feel pretty confident in those guys being one of, if not the best top line in the NHL.
But as far as the pulse of the fan base, how are they feeling about the current state of the team?
Yeah, I would say as of this point right now, confidence is probably somewhere in the middle. It's been a crazy roller coaster of a season as far as where the fan base has stood. The Fire coach Rick Bowness crowd has chilled out a little bit, but there was a stretch early in the season where fans wanted the coach gone. They kind of wanted to, just kind of start from scratch. But then the win streak happened, and even after the win streak, when things haven't always been so great, that things have died down a little bit. But I think just as far as the overall, I guess, mood of the fan base since that Stanley Cup run has been fairly positive. You say the Stars missed the playoffs last season. They were in the playoff hunt up until their very last game. I remember thinking they were out, but they went into their last game that season. I believe it was against Chicago, and there was like a 30 something percent chance that if they won and some other teams lost, that they could sneak into that last wild card spot. And so it's still, disappointing season, especially, going on that crazy cup run back in 2020. But, still a lot of confidence going forward. We were missing Tyler Seguin most of the year, Ben Bishop, who's now retired. Alexander Radulov was missing substantial minutes. But I think, Stars fans knew the future was bright with a guy like Robertson being a Calder Cup finalist, Rupe Hintz kind of coming into his own. Joe Pavelski still, doing what he does. Jamie Benn still having a little bit left in the tank. So just several guys like that, as well as some of the offseason acquisitions and Braden Holtby, Michael Raffle, and even Ryan Suter. I think Ryan Suter has been a surprise coming from Minnesota at his age, even though he signed a 4-year deal, which I'm still not a huge fan of. But at least as of right now, he's still continuing to produce and be an effective guy for the Stars on the blue line, especially with Miro Heiskanen, who just signed an 8-year deal on his own. So I think Stars fans are still generally in a good mood about this team and organization, at least in the direction it's heading. I think there's a recognition amongst the fan base and even myself that the playoffs are still kind of a maybe, but even if we miss the postseason this year, there's still a lot to look forward to down the road with some of the guys on the current roster and even some of our more recent draft pickups.
Yeah, and the Florida Panthers had some interest in Ryan Suter, and the term, I'm not the biggest fan of the term at 6 years old for Ryan Suter. And I remember listening to one of the national show podcasts. I believe it was either In the Crease with Linda Cohn and Emily Kaplan. They were talking about the Stars goaltending situation at the beginning of the season, where if you have too many goalies, that means you have no goalies. And that the Stars had a situation where they had Anton Hudobin, Ben Bishop, Braden Holtby, and then of their prize first round pick in Jake Ottinger. And now 2 of them are gone. Ben Bishop retired, and then Hudobin placed on waivers just a few weeks ago. Now the only 2 standing are Braden Holtby and Jake Ottinger, and their save percentage is just about the same from what I'm seeing. But the goals against average for Jake Ottinger is a little bit lower than Braden Holtby from what I'm seeing. Both of them, their contracts expire next year, Ottinger being an RFA, so there's higher chance of keeping Ottinger around. But what do you think about the future of the between the pipes between for the Dallas Stars?
Yeah, certainly a very interesting situation. And it was, something I talked about a whole lot going into the season of, having too many goalies. Because up until his retirement, there was kind of the belief that Ben Bishop was going to come back and maybe have, one more run in him. But he tried one game in the AHL this season and gave up 8 goals. And just after that, he and his family came to the decision that it was time to, to hang it up and call it a career, which a great career at that. And then, of course, Anton Hudobin started out the season very slow. I think he had one good game back in early November against Philadelphia, but outside of that, just gave up way too many goals, which was just kind of a shock from what we were used to seeing back in 2020 and even a little bit in 2021. So I feel pretty confident overall in the goalie situation for the Stars going forward. I think Jake Ottinger has solidified himself as a long-term goalie for this team. With the way that he played last season, having to get called up because of COVID and injuries. I don't think there was really ever the plan to get him to the NHL that early. But, I mean, it happened, and he played well then, and he's playing really well this season, having to kind of come in and under similar circumstances. And, of course, Braden Holtby has been a shock as well. Clearly a guy with a nice resume with the Stanley Cup championship, a Vezina trophy back in 2016. But, a guy that struggled a little bit last season in Vancouver. So I think there was a lot of hesitancy amongst the fan base whether or not, he would be a reliable guy between the pipes this year. But like you said, the save percentage, pretty decent. I think I talked about both these guys a lot yesterday. I think they're both 22nd and 23rd as far as save percentage goes across the whole league. And so I'm pretty confident both these guys, if they can stay healthy and keep what they're doing, they'll be a huge part in helping the Stars potentially get into the postseason. And then once they're in the postseason, if they do make it there, I think the Stars have a special, a good thing going for them with having two guys that you can put out there to start. And I think the coaching staff and the guys on the ice, the skaters, feel confident, but whoever's between the pipes, whether it's Holtby or Ottinger, I think both guys are qualified and capable of leading the team any given night against any team. However, I don't know, how long Holtby's going to be here. Like you said, his contract expiring pretty soon, his age starting to climb up a little bit. So not entirely sure how much longer we'll see him wearing green here in Dallas, but a nice guy to have on the roster this year for sure. But feel very confident in Ottinger going forward. And then, maybe we'll draft another goalie. Maybe we'll pick up another guy in free agency this coming summer.
Yeah, and at 32, it's hard to predict where Braden Holtby is going to be, and Jake Ottinger at 23, many years ahead of him. So looking at the standings in the Central Division, points percentage, they're a little bit behind Winnipeg, and they're according to I have to always adjust to points percentage when looking at the standings because not everyone has played the same amount of games due to the different cancellations. But they are ahead of Chicago and Arizona, but they are behind Winnipeg, Minnesota, Colorado, St. Louis, and Nashville. Nashville, shockingly, is up there in the standings, quietly doing it. But as far as the trade deadline and what's to come for the Dallas Stars, I think I've heard a thing or two about the possibility of someone like Joe Pavelski being traded to a contender with his contract being expiring this coming offseason. What are you thinking are the chances of the Dallas Stars possibly selling or possibly buying or staying the same?
Yeah, I think as of right now, there's not too much of a sense, at least from what I've seen and just kind of, how the season has gone, that we're going to see the departure of any big names. I mean, things happen and things can change, in an instant in the world of sports. But the biggest names I've heard thrown around for the Stars as far as trades go, John Klingberg is a guy that's been a defenseman for this team for several years, but his contract is up at the end of this season. So there's been a lot of talk of if he's going to get re-signed or if he's going to get shipped off somewhere. I've heard Carolina as the landing spot for him potentially. Haven't heard too much since the rumors surfaced about a month ago. But as far as Pavelski goes, I think that there's a lot of potential there. I think, if come trade deadline time, if the Stars think that they don't have a chance with the postseason, it would be a kind of a sad departure because Pavelski's done a lot of great things with his brief time here with the Stars. But, if the Stars and Coach Bonus think that they have a chance to make a push for the postseason, they're definitely going to hold on to a guy like Joe just because it's hard to replicate that kind of veteran leadership and experience, a guy that's been around the league as long as he has. So, but if we do give him up to a contender, a team that's looking for a guy that can, give good minutes despite his age, I think the Stars could potentially get some good return that might not benefit them this season or even next season, but could, down the line come in handy, whether it's draft picks, prospects, you name it.
And at 37 years old, and Joe Pavelski leading the Stars in both goals and assists, total points. If you're going to trade him, I think if you're the Stars, you got to be a little stubborn when it comes to like what you want. I know for the other team it'll be a rental, but definitely you see the production that he's putting at his age, and you gotta try to get something for him. And if a team's desperate enough, if they think that Pavelski is that missing piece, then you got to give up what you have to in order to get some guy with that type of production that Joe Pavelski is definitely putting for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be interested to see if any more developments come up for the Stars as far as trades go, especially coming out of this break. We'll see. There's hope that some of these veterans like Sagan and Ben and Radulov, who haven't done as much number wise this year, might pick it up a little bit, and we'll see. Maybe some guys rise or fall as far as points, assists, goals go, things like that. Well, coming up next, Armando and I will give our overall predictions and final thoughts for this upcoming game before we take off. But Before we do that, I do want to take a moment and say thank you to one of the sponsors of today's episode, and that is BetOnline.ag. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains in the number one spot for all the sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website is the perfect place to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code Locked On to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports. BetOnline.ag, where the game starts. Jumping back into today's Locked On Stars and Locked On Panthers crossover, Dane Lewis joined by Armando Velez. Armando, this is like I said at the start, big game for the Dallas Stars coming back off their COVID hiatus. And they've played historically well this season against some of the top teams in the league. They've beat Edmonton, they've beat Carolina, they've beat Colorado, St. Louis, Minnesota, but they struggle against a lot of the lesser teams. They've lost twice to Ottawa and lost some other tough games to teams like Columbus and some other middle of the pack teams. But what are your overall thoughts going into this game, and how do you see this game shaping out for the Florida Panthers?
Don't feel bad about losing to Ottawa because the Florida Panthers lost to them by a final score of 8-2 just a few weeks ago in Sunrise. So the Florida Panthers at home versus on the road are completely different. And their latest West Coast trip before coming back home, it was a trip to Colorado, Arizona, and St. Louis. I think with the Florida Panthers, with this quick 2-game trip, and then Saturday, a big one in Carolina on Saturday night against the Metro Division leading Hurricanes, I think that the Florida Panthers will at least get 3 out of 4 points in this road trip. 2 of them will come in Dallas. They'll maybe split a point this weekend.
Yeah, I think that this game is going to be a tough one for the Dallas Stars, just because they've been practicing this week. They've scrimmaged against one another, but as Coach Rick Bowness has said, and I 100% agree, you just can't quite replicate, being in game shape. Playing in an actual NHL game is so much different than playing and scrimmaging against your own team, especially when the team you're scrimmaging as and scrimmaging against one another has all been in COVID isolation. So certainly, going to be a challenge going up against a team like Florida that's been playing games, that's been on a roll as of late, coming off a big win against Calgary, like you said, and looking, to win this game and then move on and get a big win against Carolina, who's, again, one of the best teams in the league this season. So as far as predictions go, I can see the Stars dropping this game about 4-2, maybe 4-3. I can maybe see overtime. The Stars had a knack at the start of the season for going to a lot of overtime games. They think they've only been in one shootout, and that was against Pittsburgh, and they did end up winning that one on the road. But yeah, I can see, Florida is going to drop this game. It's not going to be a blowout by any means, because I just don't think the Stars are physically in shape to do such a thing, especially against such a talented team that's on such a hot streak, and, in such a good position as far as standings go. But really excited to see how this Stars team comes out and competes. I think it's going to say a lot about this team and kind of where they're at mentally. Even if they do come out and lose this game, if they put up a good fight, I think the coaching staff can be pleased with that. And I think the fan base can be pleased with that, because it's got to be difficult to, win a game on the 20th and then not play. I think they've had 6 games canceled on all of those division games. So they're going to have those rescheduled at some point, look to get back on track and climb up the division rankings a little bit with those games. But, I think, as Stars fans and, Stars members of the media, our expectation is expect them to play well because of the way they've practiced this week, but also know that winning is going to be very, very difficult, but should be an exciting game nonetheless.
No doubt. And I'm seeing that the Dallas Stars have an incredible home record of 11-3-1. Their last 10, which is hard to put a finger on right now with their pause right now of 5-5-0 in their last 10, from what I'm seeing on NHL.com. So we don't know how this Dallas Stars team is going to come out. We'll know within the first 10 minutes. The first 10 minutes is going to set the tone for the game. So we'll know by then of what Dallas Stars team we're going to see after their COVID break.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first period in general is going to be important for how this game's going to go, especially the first 10 minutes, especially, getting those, like, every single guy on the team kind of out there on the ice and see who's the most physically ready to probably play a good amount of minutes. And I think the coaching staff's going to be on the lookout for that as well. Do you have a prediction for as far as first goal for the Florida Panthers?
I'm going to say Anton Lundell.
Yeah, I feel like, there's so many weapons. It could be any guy on that roster just about. For the Stars, I'm going to go with an old reliable. It's going to be a guy from that top line, and I think Rupe Hintz, gets the job done, at least gets the scoring started for the Stars. But Armando, thanks for joining this crossover today. Really good to, be in a crossover once again. With another Locked On Podcast Network host, because the Stars haven't played in a while. So it's a nice breath of fresh air to be teaming up again. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's crossover episode between Locked On Stars and Locked On Panthers. No, I always enjoy crossing over with other hosts here at the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, more than ever, because it has been a hot minute since I got to collaborate with another host, because the Dallas Stars hadn't played anyone. But thank you guys for checking out the show. Thank you again for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe to and follow the Locked On Stars podcast wherever you find your podcast at, whether that's on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. Always free, no matter where you watch or listen. Be sure to also give us a review or rating if you like what you hear. You can find me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis. That's at DANE 2_LEWIS. You can also find the show on Twitter at Locked On Stars. Be sure to give us a follow there as well. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for a full review and recap of tonight's matchup. We'll be breaking it all down here at Locked On Stars. See you then, Stars fans. Have a great day.